So it's not the cover of Vanity Fair, but it looks like Beto O'Rourke will be coming for Governor Greg Abbott's seat next year, all right? So 3 sources are saying that O'Rourke is inching closer to announcing a run for Texas governor. The 3 people discussed, all the 3 people, all those sources, they're very anonymous. So they're all buttoned up, but we've got some clues. In recent weeks, Mr. O'Rourke has been making calls to Democratic leaders across Texas to inform them that he is seriously considering taking on Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican who is up for re-election next year. And he's begun talking to supporters about having them join his campaign staff. A decision could be made in the coming weeks, the 3 people said, possibly as soon as October. Now remember, Beto O'Rourke was running in the Democratic presidential primary. That's where he was sort of out in front, and his doggo was in the background going like, don't run, don't run, you're not gonna do well. And he didn't do well. He was one of the first people to drop out, but he ran after losing to Ted Cruz in the Senate race in 2018. And a lot of people thought, look, why would someone who lost an election then run for president? But to be fair, he only lost that Senate race by 220,000 votes, which is not very many considering how many millions came out to vote in that election. And how Ted Cruz is, again, like virtually untouchable. We're talking about a Republican incumbent who has been delivering, and by delivering, I mean skipping town and going to Cancun when his state needs him most, which I guess if you're a Republican in Texas feels like leadership to you. So it's not bizarre for him to do this, but he is hammering this, the dream of a purple Texas. That's Beto O'Rourke doing that. No Democrat has ever been elected governor of Texas since Ann Richards in 1990, and no prominent Democrat has emerged to take on Mr. Abbott next year. So it's either Beto O'Rourke or bust, pretty much, or more Greg Abbott. Nelini, you've done a lot of campaigning. You understand terrain, optics, etc. What do you make of this run at Greg Abbott right now?
Well, it's about time somebody makes a run. I mean, I think that people have been waiting for a long time for leadership to just say, I'm doing it, I'm running. We need to do this ahead of time when you're trying to take out an incumbent. So if Beto or O'Rourke is really making this decision and really considering it, I'm glad. I wish somebody would have just made the decision right when all of that terrible legislation came out, including the 6-week abortion shrinkage, as well as the snitch law, because I don't really know what else to call it.
Yes.
But I think that, listen, there have been organizers on the ground for a really long time in Texas that have been fighting to change the state. Organizations like Texas Organizing Project, Workers Defense Fund, the Texas Working Families Party, and more, who have been really organizing folks for a long time in the state. And so I really, really, really believe that if folks have a candidate that they can get behind, and that people and dollars and everything can be organized, it is about time that we get a Democratic governor in Texas. And it's also not just the governor. I think it's really important to pay attention to the state legislator. A lot of Democrats enabled what the Republicans were able to do. And I think it's really important to make sure that there's not a supermajority in that state anymore.
Absolutely. And I mean, and Texas Republicans are very open about just running roughshod over their Democratic counterparts, even when they're skipping town and trying to prevent the rollback of voting rights in that state.
That's right.
Which always boggles my mind. You have record turnout and Republicans look at that and are like, nope, I don't like it. Like that, it's so obvious that they only care about minority rule, and that's the only way that they think that they can win. Look, here's what I'll say about Beto. I don't like, the sort of Vanity Fair covers, and I was making fun of that, and like, the kind of like, I'm a young JFK or JFK, like that he's sort of trying to be like the good looking, like, young Democrat or the Barack Obama, et cetera. But I will say that on the issue of immigration and on the border, especially as you mentioned, if it does get taken out of the budget reconciliation plan, as it may be, because the parliamentarian has ruled that apparently you can't have a pathway to citizenship in the budget. Beto's one of the few politicians I've heard be able to speak very clearly about the nuances of the border, right? The US-Mexico border, the fact that, there are people who have lived and worked in Texas, who have family across the border, who cross every single day. There is not a big divide for them. There are generations of Mexican Americans that and other Central Americans who call Texas home, that it was once Mexico. And there is a sense that, whereas we're in a time when Lieutenant Governor Patrick, I believe his name is, was basically last week going on Lauren Ingram's show and saying, that this is an invasion, a foreign invasion of, of like essentially a mob, right? Or like a horde or whatever. That having a new way to talk about the border, especially from someone who has lived there, who knows it, I think that Julian Castro also has that same understanding, and obviously his brother Joaquin, because they've obviously are from Texas as well. We need that. We need that leadership, because Democrats are blind when it comes to understanding how to craft a new narrative, a human narrative, and a humane narrative about the future of the border and immigration policy.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. You have to give it to the leadership of the Castro brothers, Joaquin and Julian and Beto on this issue. They're also people who represent border, like Beto represented El Paso, right? Julian was the mayor of San Antonio, and Joaquin represents a district that is right there, right? They actually know it. They're not just talking about this place that's not even near them. They're not in Houston, just hunkering down. They're actually, they live and breathe this. And the history also of Rosie Castro, Joaquin and Julian's mom, who did a lot of farm worker organizing and migrant worker organizing. I think it's just totally critical to have these voices who are both talking about the humanity of all of this, but also the reality. And saying, no, it is not this like invasion. There aren't these caravans with thousands of vans in it that are coming to us, that are going to, that are gonna wreak violence in our communities. And so I do actually appreciate that. So if any of the three of them wanted to run, I'm here for it. And yes, it's not my favorite that Beto has to be Beto, like your name's Robert. But at the end of the day, I think that it's time for some real leadership change in Texas, and I'm going to follow the organizers on the ground to hell or high water around what they're going to do with their future.
Totally. And does he have a chance? How is Governor Abbott doing? How is he polling? Let's look at this poll. So in a new Dallas Morning Texas poll, or a Dallas Morning News poll, I said all those things right. 54% of the respondents say they believe Texas is headed in the wrong direction. And this was before the pandemic. Abbott's approval rating was at 59%. So if this is before the pandemic, I can only imagine what it is now. The poll also revealed that Matthew McConaughey would beat Abbott in a head-to-head matchup, 44% to 35%. So he might have a challenger. I don't know. Would Matthew McConaughey, is he running as a Republican? Just don't run, buddy. Just don't. Just stop. Stop trying. You're such a tryhard.
Yes, play the bongos.
Stick to acting and bongos, and there's gonna be a reboot of whatever that movie was that I've put in the back of my mind. You know what I'm saying?
He should be like a face of the campaign, and right, like. Yes. Support whoever you want to get behind against Abbott, but leave it to the real ones out here.
Yes. Okay, so this is from Axios recently. A new poll for the Dallas Morning News shows that O'Rourke has narrowed the gap with Abbott in a hypothetical matchup, down 37 to 42%. In July, O'Rourke faced a 12-point deficit, 33 to 45%. So he's creeping up on Abbott, and say what you will, there's few people who can really how many Texans are on board with Abbott from everything, from the response to, the deep freeze, and not actually addressing sort of the electrical grid properly, to, coming down against mask mandates, trying to keep people safe, to this draconian abortion law. I know there are a lot of fervent right wingers, but is that the majority? We know that Texas, no matter what, even though a lot of people have moved there from California, it's still a purple state, right? It's becoming more purple by the minute. So look, I think that I totally agree with that. The last thing I'll say is Beyonce in 2018 took a long time to endorse Beto O'Rourke. And the day before the election, she tweets something with Beto, girl, you could command way more votes than that. Get out the vote, Beyonce. Get out the vote, Matthew McConaughey. Stop trying to run for office.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.